with you, and today I want to share something about government, about poor government. We all know there's an acute rental housing shortage. It's getting worse, not better. One of the most fundamental responsibilities of government is to provide all the basic necessity for those who've elected them, and housing is one of those basic necessities. Just over a third of Australians are renters, and that proportion is actually growing. Housing is either provided by government through public housing or through private individual investors. Now, governments around Australia are cash strapped and have not committed significant monies to provide any public housing, and therefore around 90% of rental accommodation must be provided by the private investors. So with no real investment by government into public housing, there's almost a total dependence on private investors, and they should be encouraged. Yet what's happening? Well, right now, when so much rental accommodation is required, our Queensland State Government is actually disincentivising people. Now, I have publicly voiced for some time now that an incentive program should be put in place in the areas where the greatest need is. What the state government should be doing is reducing stamp duty on the purchase of investment properties on the basis that those properties remain in the investment pool, the rental pool, for 3 to 5 years. They could also reduce land tax for that same period of time, and the federal government could chip in and provide some tax incentives as well to attract people away from other forms of investment like shares or cryptos or fixed rate deposits, and encourage people to buy rental properties. I would even suggest that they could target the areas of most need, where the incentive might be in a particular postcode where there's a greater need for rental accommodation. A suburb like Southport here on the Gold Coast, as opposed to other areas where the demand is not so great. So here we are with this critical need for more rental accommodation, yet listen to this. The Queensland Government has just announced an increase in lands tax by not only taxing properties in the state of Queensland, as they have done for all time, but they're now going to include in their assessment any properties owned by a landlord anywhere else in Australia, which means that the threshold is surpassed so much quicker, meaning people will pay more tax. Not only that, people have been paying tax in the other states of Australia. So what they've done is made an increase in tax at the very time that we're trying to incentivise people to buy. Now, the logical thing for most investors is simply to say, I'm not going to buy. Or for others who own properties, to actually say, I'm going to sell out. Perhaps for some who have got investments in various states, they'll go, well, I'll sell out of Queensland, I'll just invest in another state where there's not this double tax. But that's not the end of it. We now have just been subjected to a further adjustment in the legislation of Landlord and Tenants Act here in Queensland. It's gone through Parliament, takes effect very shortly. And what it's doing is weakening landlords' rights and strengthening tenants' rights. Most people see this as an imbalance, and it's no longer fair, but very much in the favour of tenants. I'm not particularly concerned because I know that with good property management, the new legislation can be managed. But for many landlords that either self-manage or have a managing agent that's not skillful, then there's going to be a significant impost and something to drive landlords out of the rental market. I just can't picture how this came about. I would have imagined that there's been cabinet discussions at some stage in the last year or two talking about the housing crisis and what could be done at government level to help this situation. Surely the Premier asked the Minister for Housing what's on the drawing board and what suggestions they can make to encourage more investors. Surely the Premier would also have had discussions with the Treasurer, asking him what could be done to incentivise more investment purchases to help this crisis. Yet the complete reverse has happened. Two decisions that have made buying rental investment properties far less attractive and have gone through Parliament already. Simply crazy. And so this does disadvantage tenants at the worst possible time. Now, I'm certainly getting heavily vocal on this particular issue. It's not too late to change what they're doing and defer those decisions if they really have to make them, and let the housing crisis pass through. It's simply bad government to make this decision at this time. Now, my greatest concern is about 87% of all residential rental properties are owned by people who have just one rental property. They're not particularly experienced and sophisticated investors, and for them, these proposed changes puts a higher level of uncertainty and concern, and it will result in a percentage of them simply not buying an investment property. For those that own a couple of properties, I've already encountered 3 people in the last week who have listed their properties for sale just because they're furious with the government and have just decided it's all too hard. The reality is, for people who are a little bit more au fait with how the world works, they'll simply manage the new legislation effectively and sadly increase the rents to cover the land tax. And so the tenants are the ones who are hit. Here we are, supposed to have a state government trying to help the situation rather than being a hindrance, and it's failed. It's only a week away from our Roadwide Surfers Paradise Muscular Dystrophy Ball. We've got 2 tables available if anyone's keen to have a great night. And if you can't pull a whole table together, we can certainly accommodation 2s or 4s or singles. Just reach out to us. Our details are on screen of our ball coordinator. And also want to thank so many of you this year have been particularly generous, reaching out and making direct donations to the charity. Of course, they're tax deductible. Well, we're rolling into spring, looking forward to the usually busy spring season. We've seen a pickup in activity over the last couple of weeks, which is really encouraging. And we're certainly looking forward to some warmer weather. When is it ever coming? All the best for now.